Hour 3 of Overdrive underway with Mike DeStefano, a.k.a. Al's brother. Got Noodles and the O-Dog with me. Keegan Matheson going to join us in about 5 minutes. It was a big day in Blue Jay land. There was a deadline last night that the Jays and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. had to meet in order for Vladdy to sign an extension. The deadline came and gone, and no extension was made. So Vladdy hitting the market this summer.
Crazy. It's
crazy. Yeah.
It's just to a point where in a world, and I want to ask Keegan this out of the gate, like in a world where athletes are basically handed the bag, not handed, they do things, obviously they separate themselves, their talents, their abilities, whatever it is, but everyone gets paid nowadays. Like if you're an elite talent, you get paid. And for whatever reason, and the other thing is that people need to understand this, you don't just tell Ross and Mark, this is my number, and you get it. There is a process, and I don't know. It's just bizarre. All I want to know is why did they not want to pay the man? Because I'm sure there was some number out there that was reasonable, and it just, in their minds, was just unreasonable. And now, I don't know. It's just going to be I think it's going to be messy. Like Vladdy said he didn't want to negotiate during the season because that's a distraction. I think him not negotiating is a massive distraction.
Well, it's going to be talked about a lot here.
Every week they're going to say any word on the contract, and like unless he comes out and says, "Don't ask me about it the rest of the season," he might have to do that.
He probably will. I would imagine he will. But like, here's a comment that he had earlier today that I thought was, a shot across the bow, pretty loud and clear. He said, "I'm here. We didn't get an agreement. Now they're going to have to compete with 29 other teams." That's what Vladimir Guerrero Jr. said to Toronto media this morning. That is quite the mic drop.
It is. Like, all I could think of is this the same as the Mitch Marner situation? But, Mitch Marner controls his scenario where Vladdy doesn't, right? They could trade him and just get pieces for him. But it just, I don't know. They see something. That's where I keep coming back to. They've seen something in Vladdy that they don't want to pay that number. And whether it's his
Jamie,
diet,
but the fans, you understand this more than anyone. The fans want to know is, okay, we're moving away from Vlad. What is this? What is Plan B?
Well, that's it. Yeah. I don't think there can be. Like it'll be interesting, and that's something that we could probably ask Keegan. If there's no Vlad, and keep in mind, Bo Bichette also is an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year and could walk for nothing. So Vlad and Bo, the two pillars of your team over the last 5 years, could both take off and get absolutely nothing for it. And if that happens, what do? Do you go into a full-fledged rebuild and start trading off anyone who has value? Or do you take the money that you were going to give those two that didn't want it and go and try and get multiple pieces and try and put together a winning ball club? It will be interesting to see what they decide to do. Because the offseason that they just had does not necessarily say, hey, this is 1 year and it's a last hurrah. This is an offseason where they sign guys to multiple year contracts and they expect to be competitive for a few years down the line. So I don't know where they're going to go if things go south here with Vladdy.
Well, you're going to ask him all year. He's got an interpreter, right? And he's going to just say that's not talking about it or don't want to get into it.
I thought his message today, Jamie, would have been a lot stronger. Like, I know I don't believe the interpreter, and I don't want to get into a whole. I just don't. I think like he talks to everybody at first base, so there's no interpreter there. I thought his message would have been a lot stronger if he just no interpreter because he knew what the questions were going to be. Yeah. Was the deal close? Like he didn't need an interpreter for that.
Well, he didn't. He said no. One word answer. No was the answer to that question.
Well, then they're $100 million apart. That's right. Then he's got something with a 5 in it. They've got something with a 4 in it, and they've dug in. And you know what? Take your business hat. You got to put it on too. Do you believe in Atkins, or you just say give him whatever he wants? And then what happens if he hits 28 dingers this year?
I don't believe in like if they're $100 million apart. Like that's what I literally heard people say. This organization's a joke. And then 5 minutes later, they said, I wouldn't give them the money either. So it can't be both.
It is an interesting kind of predicament that the Blue Jays do find themselves in, because if you look at Vlad's career, he's coming off of an MVP-worthy season. He was fantastic last year, hit 30 home runs, 323 batting average, a 940 OPS. And you could argue it was his best season, if not second best season. A few years back, he had that MVP-worthy year. But outside of those 2 seasons, he's been a good player, above average player. Maybe you can even say great, but he hasn't been a superstar outside of those 2 seasons. So if you are the Blue Jays, you got to wonder, okay, what Vlad are we going to get the next 10 years? Last year's Vlad, or those 2 seasons of Vlad, or the other 4 years of Vladimir Guerrero Jr.? It is a tough question to ask.
But that's what they're asking themselves, and they're betting and saying, this is the financial area that we're willing to go to, and keep in mind, a lot of things factor in. Rogers, there's a lot of money involved here. The dollar is not strong, so you're going to have to pay a lot of money on that, on the juice on that. To me, I still come back to they see something that they do not believe he is worth that number. Now, will somebody else give it to him? He's betting on himself, but I just, you're going to lose that asset, but it's not like hockey where you're going to take that money and spend it on somebody else, in a salary cap. This isn't a hard cap in baseball. And I don't know, would you look at it and say the Blue Jays have done nothing with him and Bo there anyways, right? So they might be looking for a change.
Yeah, that could be the case, but that'd be a tough sell, an absolutely tough sell, especially if they get nothing in return.
Brother, before you get to Keegan, I just want to say this interview is under protest with Keegan.
Yes.
He just sent a picture of him on his porch, and he said he can't wait till this interview is over because he wants to have a porch beer. Disgusting behavior.
Let's bring him in. Keegan Matheson, MLB.com Blue Jays reporter. What's the bevy of choice the second you hang up with us, Keegs?
You know what, fellas? I'm going to run out the show with you guys because this means more to me than a crisp, delicious balcony beer here in Florida. Let me tell you.
Keegan, so let's just get down to it, obviously. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., the deadline was set. It was not met, and then we've heard from Vladdy, we heard from Shapiro, we heard from Atkins today. What do you make of everything that went down the last 24 hours with Vladdy and the non-extension?
Nothing good happened today. Absolutely nothing good, nothing encouraging to take from it whatsoever. It was a ugly morning for the Blue Jays as an organization. And for Vladdy, it was a fascinating morning because I thought that Vladdy handled this quite well. He has, as we've heard from others, he's grown up a lot in these last couple of years. And I think he has come to understand this business side at just the right time. Now, growing up around the game helps that, but this level of decision could be overwhelming for a kid that is 25 going 26. He seems oddly comfortable with it, strangely comfortable with it. He's really managed it well from what I can see. Obviously, what fans heard from Ross Atkins and then later Mark Shapiro was not what anyone wanted to hear because people wanted this to be a celebratory day. They wanted Vladdy extended. This deadline has been hanging over camp now, and from here on, it's going to hang over the season. Guys, I understand why Vladdy set that deadline, and I think it was wise of him, but every story I write this year will have that line in it. But this is Vladdy's last year, potentially. Every question we ask will have a little twinge of this to it. This is really going to hang over everything we see from this team, because this competitive window was all tied to Vladdy. Yes, it was about Bo and other prospects and adding the Springers and Ryus and Gosmans and everyone else, but Vladdy was in the center of this entire thing for the last almost decade, since those 15 and 16 teams. And if you lose a Vladdy, you can spend a hell of a lot of time looking for your next Vladdy. Sometimes you don't find them for a while, and the Blue Jays now are looking at that major risk, which is not exciting anybody.
How did we get here today, Keegan? What is it about Vladdy? And people do need to understand you can ask for the world and you're not necessarily going to get it. So there might have been some outrageous number that the Jays just weren't willing to go to. But in the day and age of star players getting paid, why was he not paid today?
And it's a good point that we don't know the numbers. That's a big factor in all of this. Now, the closest we got was Ross Atkins saying that this would have been a record-breaking contract. So I said, Ross, what record would it have broken? And he said the Blue Jays record. George Springer is the biggest Blue Jays contract. That means it was over $150 million. I would hope so. My goodness. That's probably the first 4 years of the deal.
Will they leak the numbers, Keegan? Do you think the numbers will get leaked relatively shortly?
I think they will, and the first time I hear it, I will not believe it. When you hear it the first time, I'd be awfully hesitant. It's something I would want to hear in detail from both sides. And the numbers, like you mentioned, are a big part of this because it's possible the Blue Jays were really lowballing. It's possible Vladdy was asking for $1 billion. We don't know that right now. But it is clear, guys, like you mentioned, star player contracts in Major League Baseball have taken off. It doesn't matter that Vladdy is not Ohtani and he's not Soto, because he isn't. But contracts are moving in one clear direction, and it's happening pretty suddenly. And that's turned all of this into a moving target that the Blue Jays have had to chase a little bit. I don't view this as a front office that chases things. They like to set their values, stick to that. The word discipline, I know, is what everyone wants to hear right now. That really fires folks up. But this has been a moving target, and like Vladdy said, they were not close. The word close got twisted and beat up a bunch today. I don't know what it means anymore. But Vladdy says they weren't close, and that's what matters.
So is there any chance, and you might have answered the question already, but maybe I'm twisting it a bit, that this could be taken to the muck a little bit, where the agent starts leaking stuff, or kind of you start negotiating in the media, and you go in different directions to try and manipulate the situation, or because it seems like everything with the Blue Jays and Atkins and Shapiro, they're tight-lipped. They keep everything to the vest. But maybe the agent starts to stir it up on the other side and maybe forces their hands to kind of negotiate a little bit more in public, where we do know numbers or we do know scenarios that could maybe either explode this situation or help bridge it.
It sure could happen, guys. And the point that I would keep an eye on, like time-wise, would be if Vladdy just gets off to an unbelievable start. We're 2 months into the season. He's already into the 20s of home runs. He's OPSing over 1,000. He might be an MVP candidate. Wow, the Blue Jays didn't give him X number. Maybe that's when it trickles in. And again, it's something I'd want to hear from both sides. I'm always hesitant. When you hear it the first time, why is it coming out? Who is motivated to have that out? I'm always a little wary. But when it reaches that point, it can get messy. Guys, we've talked about the Aaron Judge example from a couple of years back a lot of times. Going into 2022, I remember how shocking that was, where kind of out of nowhere, Brian Cashman said, hey, this guy turned down this many years and this many dollars. And it was a bit of a shocking moment that I don't think Aaron Judge loved. Eventually, that was repaired. But I think the Blue Jays are quite the opposite of that. We've seen that through Ohtani, Soto, and this thing. They don't like to say much in these situations. I'd expect it'll stay that way, but if Vladdy is on a tear to start the year, some things might loosen up.
How is this going to resonate back when they get home or back to Toronto, Keegan? I mean, Vladdy said he didn't want to negotiate during the season. He thought that would be distracting. I almost feel it would be more distracting with this scenario. Like, how does this bleed into the fans coming to the game? Are you guys going to be asking Vladdy on a weekly basis if there's an update? It just seems like this could get ugly when they get back to Toronto.
Yeah, that's not going to go well, because while I understand that Vladdy does not want to negotiate through the season, it is the single most important story about the Blue Jays this year and for several years, frankly. It's going to get asked about. If he's playing well, it will get asked about. If he's playing poorly, it will get asked about. If he gets hurt, it will get asked about. And fans are going to be all over this, because this one, guys, is where I really need to think of your casual fan who wants to go to the game, have a beer, watch a couple of games on TV each week. They don't care all that much about where the numbers might have been, which we still don't know. They don't care much about how first basemen are valued or market valuations, blah, 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 any of those multi-syllable words. They care about the fact they love Vladdy. Vladdy is a Blue Jay, and he wants to stay a Blue Jay. He keeps saying that. That's going to catch people because fans love this guy. The Blue Jays' history is full of either star players who have left later in their career. Think about a Halladay, a Delgado, or star players who came to the Blue Jays when their careers were already established. You look at Joe Carter's, Jose Bautista's, there's lots of examples. This is the shot at a guy who stays and plays 15 years and takes a run at being the greatest Blue Jay of all time. People are going to grab to that. There's going to be the "We Want Vladdy" chants, and I think he's probably going to give them a lot of reasons to do that along the way.
If you were the Jays PR guy, Keegan, and after the scrums were over and you sat down in a room with Mark and Ross and they said, "How do you think we handled the questions today?" what would you say to them?
So, fellas, that's when I would crack the beer, I think, right then and there.
I mean, I don't know if there's any way to break that news and do it in a way where fans are going to appreciate what you have to say, but they just have a way of not sounding like human beings. Answer like they couldn't get into the word close, and it was just an awkward exchange. And you talk about Vladdy bringing it back to Toronto. Can those two bring their act back to Toronto and not be hated? Is that possible?
That's awfully difficult at this point, guys, because fans want Vladdy, and they connect that directly to this and to Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro, who we heard from today. Shapiro was the more direct of the two. He saying that there's no such thing as close. You get the guy or you don't, which I agree with. I don't care about close in a negotiation, free agency, anything. It doesn't exist. One team gets a guy, 29 don't, period. But I do understand that what fans want to hear at this point is something more in the direction of, listen, we didn't get it done right now. We love this guy. We think we can get close. We're going to keep this rolling all season long. We want to bring him back. It happened with Aaron Judge. Let's make Vladdy a Blue Jay. Because when you do speak about valuations and about discipline, et cetera, you're speaking to a very small percentage of the fan base, I believe. And, guys, this is something I try to remind myself day to day when I'm doing my job, is that 95% of fans are a casual fan who has a couple of favorite players. They love Vladdy. They love going to a ball game. They love the Blue Jays, and they don't care what the exit velocity was or the launch angle. And it's going to be awfully hard to connect with those fans who are being told something they don't want to hear, which is that Vladdy might be going to free agency where 29 other teams can bid on him, especially, guys, after we have seen those free agent processes run their course with the Blue Jays coming close at the top of the market, but not landing the Ohtani, the Soto, the Roki Sasaki recently. That's a very tough sell, and let's call it a room I'm happy I was not in, fellas. That's a good way to call it.
With Keegan Matheson, I want to go back to the close discussion, and Vladdy was pretty blunt when asked if they were close. He said no, and then Mark and Atkins had a different interpretation of what the word close was. But I'm curious if you think it's because, why weren't they close? Is it more so because they're unsure of what Vladdy is? Is he the MVP that he was a year ago? Or is he the, good player that he was the 2 seasons prior? Or is there maybe just some discrepancy in pay based on, positional value? Why weren't they close?
Yeah, that was the big one today. I've walked all the way across the hotel room, fellas, because I want the quote on my laptop. It just depends on how you define close. That's too big of a word to talk specifically about, and I'm not comfortable talking about numbers, was how Ross Atkins asked.
Well, what would have been the worst case scenario if he said, you know what, we were $100 million apart. We just would that piss off their agent? What would be the harm in saying that?
Agents wouldn't like it, I don't think, when you crack that open. Okay. I often think there's too much paranoia around that, frankly. I don't think agents would love it getting to this point. But when you talk about close guys, a year ago it was really hard to evaluate Vladdy because he was not coming off this great year. He was coming off of good years, not great ones.
Right.
Now he has a great 2024, and he had that great 2021 when he almost won MVP. Yeah, it's a little tougher with a first baseman instead of a shortstop or an outfielder. It's a little tougher to find that sweet spot. But we're not talking about a situation where they should be hundreds of millions off or 5-7 years of length off. They should have a bit of a closer middle ground than that. Now, if you are Vladdy, you can also ask for the world right now, knowing that 9 months from now, you are going to have a pretty cool opportunity to sit at the table and be the most attractive free agent on the market in a big spending winter. That's a pretty fun place to be. But the definition of close, I certainly erred more to the Mark Shapiro side, which is that there's no such thing as close. And Vladdy's answer is what matters most. He was very short, direct. He said no. Were you close? No.
Well, I mean, the only thing I could take away from that, guys, is let's say they were $10 million a year apart on a 13-year deal. That's $130 million. But you're defining close. If you're $5 million a year apart, technically that's not a lot. But if you're doing it on a term deal, now you're at $50-60 million apart. So I think maybe that's where Atkins is saying, well, define close. You're going down to yearly or you're going to the life of the contract. But the fact that they won't share numbers, we won't be able to define whether it's close or not just based on lack of information.
And the annual value is something that's way more important that gets discussed about. I think in baseball, right, and I'm at fault for doing this too much, saying, oh, it's a $400 million, it's a $500 million. Well, is that 7 years or 20 years? What are we talking about here? I think with Vladdy, the average annual value, which I think we do a much better job of in hockey contracts, for example, the average annual for Vladdy, you're probably looking into those high 30s going into the low 40s range. That's a rough 10-year, $400 million. Do you go up from there, down from there, up in years, down in years? Then you get into deferrals and opt-outs and all of the more complicated factors. But it's better and simpler to focus on that annual value. That's a smaller thing. It's more controllable. And you go from there. Because if it's a big gap, yikes. But if once you start getting within a few million, you start asking yourself, well, what is this guy worth to ticket sales? What is he worth to how we're going to be able to attract other free agents, which is a whole other conversation now. But that's where you've got to get. There's a sweet spot that they're clearly just not close to.
Well, and if they remain not close between now and the trade deadline, how likely is it that the Blue Jays start fielding calls on Vladdy?
You absolutely have to. Unless the Blue Jays are making a legitimate run, in which case you swing the other way. You say, this is Vladdy's last year, maybe. This is Bo's last year, maybe. You've got to make a run at it. Blow out and make a run at it this time more than ever before. But if the Blue Jays are having a poor season, or even more awkwardly, guys, if they're stuck in the middle, you've got to look at that as a potential turning point for the franchise. And I don't want to get too doomsday ahead, but this is part of what the Blue Jays are looking at now. If they get into the season and it's not going well, when you look down on the farm, there's not another Vladdy coming. There's not another Bo Bichette coming right now. They have some top guys, but not a Vladdy, not a Bo, not a guy who you can definitively build around in the next couple of years. If that presents an opportunity to find one of them, it's something they're going to have to very uncomfortably entertain, because it is not easy to find these guys. And the last 6 or 7 years are not a good example of this, but it's the most important thing that you can find. It's like having a rookie QB on that cheap deal, and you can add stars around him. You know, it's so valuable to have those young, developed stars who are progressing through their cheaper years. You got to find them. I don't think the Blue Jays have one coming right now. Uncomfortable as it is, Vladdy might end up being that opportunity 6-7 months from now.
Well, you talk about the organization and the franchise and the leadership. Like, what group gets to withstand all that and continue to make decisions like for the organization moving forward? I mean, they blew out Josh Donaldson and Tulo and all these guys, and they were starting over. And then they said they were World Series contenders, which a lot of other people also thought they were. They haven't won squat. They haven't won a playoff game. And are they going to be allowed to be a part of another cycle through?
It's tough, man. 3 different ways I look at this quickly. One is going through managers. You go from Gibby to Montoyo to John Schneider. This group has gotten a few managers. They've gone through a few pivots as well. They started with that veteran team, tore down, rebuilt. They built up to make the playoffs. 2021, they had that incredible offensive team. Then they pivoted away from that to defense. Now they're trying to pivot back a little bit to offense. That's multiple pivots at this point as well. Do you get to go into another full rebuild? That isn't likely. That does not happen much in Major League Baseball, where one failed rebuild leads into another without changes. Especially, guys, when at the end of the day, the biggest number here is a 0. 0 postseason wins since those 2015, 2016 teams. If the Blue Jays were to end this Vladdy and Bo era with 0 postseason wins, that's just crushing. That's absolutely crushing. This was the dream duo. You rarely get a duo like this coming up who are not just this good, but that beloved, that marketable by fans. To go through all of this without a postseason win until now, that's rough. That's really rough.
Really quickly, Keegan, I mean, now that the deadline's passed for Vlad, like, do you think they'll end up circling back on Bo Bichette here?
I think that they will have that conversation, but I don't consider it all that likely. But Bo, especially coming off last year, if Vladdy's hard to find a number for, my goodness, Bo is extra hard. I think he is a guy who will be motivated to have a huge year, maybe chase that Willie Adames-esque money. But I would still expect Bo to be in free agency next year. I don't expect it to be a fun free agency for Jays fans next year. It sounds stressful already.
Yeah, it hasn't been for the last couple of years, Keeg. With the Ohtani watch and Soto, next year's going to feel terrible, especially if he ends up with the Red Sox, who apparently are the leading contenders in the Vladimir Guerrero sweepstakes already.
Oh, God.
Oh,
Here
boy.
we go.
Oh, boy. All right, All right, we'll let you get to your, we'll get you out of here so you can get back to your balcony beer, pal. Look at that. Oh, we're sitting here looking at snowbanks, and you're looking at some beautiful, beautiful lake out there in Dunedin. I am a very, very jealous man. Keegan, thank you for doing this as always, pal. We'll chat again soon.
I'll have one for each of you fellas. Take care. Talk soon.
There he goes. Keegan Matheson, Blue Jays reporter for MLB.com.
Gotta say a little shout out to the reporters, like everyone that covers pro sports. When you're a player, and this is true, and it's ignorant, and it's just the way it is, you're like, oh, God, here comes these people again. Here comes this guy who wants to talk to me. Like, seeing the people work and how they get their job done at the Four Nations face-off, like late night, at practice the next day, like running around. It's just, it really is impressive, and I give a massive shout-out to every one of them, my colleagues at TSN and everybody that does it, because it's just round-the-clock work, and they're so good at it, and they work so hard. Yeah. And all they're doing is trying to do their job and promote the game, promote the stories, the storylines. And it just kind of made me think, like when I was a player, all I said was, like a lot of the times, oh, here they come again to bother us.
Here comes Chip. Here comes Chip.
Whatever, and it's an ignorant way to approach it, and I just want to acknowledge that everybody there was incredible the way they worked.
Some of them, I mean, enjoy their lives, though. Some of them crawl into the practice in the morning, and they've enjoyed the city, which I don't mind. I actually do respect.
They have a great time. They have a great time, and I respect that about them as well, Jamie.
Exactly.
Who are the bag chuckers out in Nashville? Those guys.
Oh, Chris Mason and Hal Gill.
Yeah, those guys.
There's some bag chuckers in the media. I think as soon as they they're under the gun to get that piece written and filed or whatever, and as soon as that last letter is typed, it's floor it, pin it, get the whiskey going. I don't know. Yeah, my days of going out are over. I didn't even get to put eyes on who was roaming around Montreal.
No?
I go to bed at 9 o'clock.
No, but Thing is that at the morning skate, you should be able to see who crawls in. That's the difference. I put eyes on people at morning skate all the time to see if their face is on sideways or not.
Yeah.
That's where you can really tell who's had a time or not. But you're right. The guys they put in a lot of work, and you're right. Guys like Masters, we tease all the time, but
guy
he's
works
a
his
workaholic.
ass off.
Oh,
man.
Yeah, he does.
God,
He really
Shog,
does.
like Pierre, CJ, like all the media that were there, like every outlet. It's just, it was around the clock. It doesn't stop, and they're just so good at it. And then you go home and you see Twitter and you see how they just put their stuff out. It's great work. I'm not just saying that because I'm in the media now. It's just you get to see what they actually do, as opposed to being a guy that said, "Oh God, here they come again." So
different perspective, though. It's perspective. That's what it is.
Exactly.
Different perspective, pal. All right, we still got some confirm or deny to get to. We'll do that next here on Overdrive on TSN2 and on TSN 1050.
I can neither confirm or deny that this is in fact a segment.
Austin trades Andrew Raycroft to Toronto in exchange for the rights to Tuukka Rask.
It's been my honor and a privilege to serve as the general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs Hockey Club.
It's time for confirm or deny.
Do you regret giving all those gentlemen the no trades or no movement clauses?
Well, I can neither confirm or deny that.
I can't confirm or deny.
All right, it's Tuesday, which means it's time to get into some confirm or deny statements will be made. We'll either confirm them or deny them, and let's get cooking. We'll stick with the Blue Jays theme here, and the first one we got, not signing Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is the biggest mistake in franchise history.
I'm going to deny it because, as Jamie mentioned, if this guy was asking for something outrageous, and I'm sure this evening, sometime later this evening, the numbers are going to be leaked in some capacity. And what happens if this guy ultimately is a dud? What happens if the focus on preparation, fitness, diet, all of that doesn't stay intact, and you've got all that money swallowed up in a guy who conducts himself like that? So there's risk either way. And they've decided, and by the way, this has been year after year. They've taken this guy to ARB, I think, 3 times.
Yep.
And they've just decided they're not handing him the bag right now anyway. So I'm going to deny it because who knows if he's that guy that's had the 2 seasons that have been incredible. Maybe he's not that guy. And it seems like the numbers that the Jays are crunching, they don't believe he's going to be that guy. Or they would have paid him like he is that guy. So I'm going to deny it.
Yeah, I'm denying it too. They see something. I don't know what it is because we're not behind the curtain.
But Jamie, it's whether they're right or wrong in what they see.
Right.
You're right, but here's the thing. If and I can understand it from the Blue Jays fan perspective, is the Blue Jays, everyone up here, Hayes always says that, nobody wants to come to Toronto, all of that. And if Vladdy wants to stay here, then you got to figure it out. But at what number? Like, to me, it has to be an outrageous number that they haven't gotten this done. Even if you decide, okay, as a company, as ownership, you decide we're going to overpay because we're going to get it back in jersey sales. We're going to get it back because this guy is the face of our organization. And you decide to overpay by X amount per year, millions per year. It might not be good enough. That's the thing. Like, I until we know the numbers, I don't think it is, but I'm going to deny it. I think once the numbers get released, you're going to go, okay, this guy wants $50 million a year on a 12 or 13 million or 13-year deal.
So what's the number you think that villainizes Vladdy? Like, what's that number that makes you go, oh, no wonder Ross didn't balk there.
Is it 500? 500 million total in the contract over, 12 years? 40 to 50 million a year?
Something like that would probably be the number. So if it comes in lower...
That's what's crazy, guys. If you think about a couple years ago where things didn't get to this stratosphere before Ohtani, before Soto, before Judge, like, they could have had this guy at an all-world discount deal.
Right.
All-world.
Well, you look at
yes.
Acuna's deal is like the biggest sweetheart contract in baseball.
It's a 10-year, $100 million deal.
And he's an
they
MVP.
overwhelmed that guy and said, you want $100 million? And he said, damn right I do. And they signed him to a 10-year, $100 million deal. And at the time, that was like, oh, my God, look at the bag they gave that guy.
Yeah.
Now it seems like just a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, well, it was considered a risk, right? Like, is he really what they think he's going to be? A lot of prospects hadn't panned out, but he's turned out to be worth every penny and triple that, realistically, quadruple that.
He must be pissed now, though.
Wow. Yeah. Which is maybe a reason why Vladdy wasn't willing to make that bet. He bet on himself.
Look that up. How many years is left on that? It's probably at least 4 or 5, possibly 6. Because that guy had $10 million a year.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Won a World Series.
He's pissed now.
Well, I'll say, I'm looking at Bryce Harper's deal. He said before the deals weren't too crazy. I mean, this was considered a whopper when he signed this back in 2019. But his contract, 13 years, $330 million, and that was outrageous.
It was
at the time,
because that's the one that topped the A-Rod one from many years ago, and it's like $340 million. Oh my God! And I'm sure Bryce is looking around saying, I mean, at the end of the day, he's probably not complaining about it. No. How much money could you possibly need? But he's like, man, if I just hit the jackpot like 8 years later.
Guy's a TikTok star now, though. You see, he's doing all these at-home videos now. It's Bryce Harper's an interesting cat.
Maybe he's got a second interest, but I don't know why a guy who's so famous and is on TV playing baseball every day wants to bring the world in to watch him make a coffee.
Yeah, I don't know.
He is,
it is
Jamie.
weird. It is weird.
He's like, this is how I make my coffee in the morning. I was like, man, you really want to go there with people?
He was making banana bread the other day.
Banana bread, I saw that. I saw that.
And not just because it's because of the idiot. I can't imagine the idiot comments. Like, the idiot comments would drive me away so quickly.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. He's just trying to normalize. Like, that's how bored he is. He's sitting in his, beautiful kitchen. You could see, the high-end stove behind him and everything. He's making banana bread. It was ridiculous. You know, it just, I don't know. You must be bored or something. You got to find something better.
Something to do in the off season. Something to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to. I think I'm going to confirm it, though, personally. And look, this is an organization that has made a lot of missteps. But to me, as Keegan was saying, they built their entire organization's future around this guy. And if you don't get him signed, that was plan A. And you don't get him signed, now you got to move on to plan B. And I'm not sure they know what that looks like. So to me, that's an organizational failure to not get this done and find some sort of resolution, or at least figure it out sooner than day one of camp. Why this wasn't more of a priority back in November is a question that I also have. Maybe you would have had the whole offseason where there's more suitors available in the trade market if you know that this guy's asking for $500 million and you know you're not going to want to pay that, and he's not going to come off of it by $150 million.
It seems like there was a lot of different avenues to go down other than get to the point we were at this morning.
Yes.
Where it's all of a sudden day one of training camp, and that is quite a sour note to start the year off. It's doom and gloom on day one. That is not good PR, man.
No, not at all. All right, next one. Confirm or deny? Elias Pettersson will never find his stride again as a star player for the Vancouver Canucks.
Elias Pettersson will star again for the Canucks.
Will never star again.
He said never.
I got to go recency bias and confirm it. After what I saw in that Sweden game, playing 9 minutes in kind of a laugher where everybody could have kind of took a deep breath and said, let me put on a show here, he didn't even come close.
You're right,
not
though,
even come close.
But the word is never, and I'm going to say I'm denying this because I think he is going to find his form. I really do. I think at some point,
maybe it's with a different team, Jamie.
It could be, or you just said, at the starting of the show, you said he's got to get in the gym. What if he grows up and just matures physically? That's what I mean. He's got that man strength. You know what guys are like when they're 27, 28, 29. Like that Mark Stone skates around out there. That's man strength. He goes into a corner, he comes out with the puck every time. That's I look at that. If Pettersson has some, good couple summers of working out and just being stronger on the puck.
Listen to what you just said. A guy that's on an $11.6 million contract needs a couple summers in the gym. That is insano talk.
The thing that would worry me is the fact that it's lingered into the following season. Like, if that were the case, you'd think that conversation should have happened about getting in the gym, put on some weight, get some strength, so that what happened at the end of last year, what did he score, like 2 goals from the moment he signed that contract all the way through to the playoffs? It was ugly, an ugly end to the year. You would think that conversation would have happened and he would have got off to a much better start this season. Instead, it's just continued. So how can you have, how can you think that it's going to change on a whim going forward? I don't know.
I don't think it'll change on a whim. Maybe he limps through the rest of this season, but I just don't think he's going to be an irrelevant player. I think he's going to be a top-notch player. The guy has had, I think, a 100-point season, did he not, or close to it?
A couple of years ago, yeah, before he
had
signed
a
that deal.
100-point season.
You don't forget how to play hockey. Your confidence can get shot. There are things that, circumstances that come in your life and go. But I do believe he will regain his form. It might not be anytime soon, but we might be having this conversation 3 years from now and going, man, that guy, that guy's finally, the light's gone on for him. It took, I don't know, this Pierre-Luc Dubois looks like a player in Washington, right? It took him 3 or 4 organizations to kind of sort it out, but maybe it is a change of scenery, or maybe it's just growing up. But I do believe in him, but maybe I'm in the minority of that.
Well, Vancouver needs him to turn things around. They bet a lot on him, obviously, with the contract, and then choosing him over Miller was another strong bet. So they doubled down on Pettersson. He's got to come through for them. All right, last one here. Maybe we could do another little after dark afterwards if we got some time. But the NBA All-Star Games this weekend, not sure if either of you caught a second of it.
I did a little bit.
A little bit of it. USA versus the world is the only way to fix NBA All-Star Weekend. Taking a page out of the Four Nations face-off.
Nothing. They're not denying it all. They got to blow it up. Honestly, the only way to make that game somewhat interesting, I think, would be for the MVP, the best player in the game, to make $10 million. I truly believe that's the only way that would get their attention. It's been embarrassing for 5 or 6 years. Like the pride in the All-Star game of MJ, Larry Bird, and I know that's really dating myself, but even LeBron, early years, Steph Curry, like it has turned into a laughable experience as far as the viewer.
Yeah.
They got to just blow up the whole thing. They've all shown the world that they love showing up. That's the crazy thing. They all make sure to be there. But as far as playing, I don't know. I think the whole league's in trouble. They don't even play regular season games. They don't play on the road. They got guys that don't dress. Like, they wonder why viewership is down. It's not because everybody's shooting threes all night. It's because guys don't play hard and guys don't play,
care.
period.
So, like, why should the viewer care if they don't care to play? LeBron showed up this weekend and then pulled shoot day of the game. Just said, actually, I'm just not going to play today. I'm going to focus on the Lakers and making a run with Luka. It's like, then why'd you come?
Yeah, like I laid eyes, and I don't know how I got caught, but I watched the NBA All-Star Celebrity Game, and there was a mascot playing in it. Like there was a guy in like a Wile E. Coyote uniform. I don't know what the hell it was. There was a mascot playing, and then you're looking at them like, who is that person? There was like one, I think, heartthrob, because every time that guy touched the ball, the girl started screaming. I called my daughter over. I'm like, who the hell is that? She's like, I have no idea. That person didn't make one basket. It was amateur hour. Like, I think the score for the longest time was like 12-10 for Team Bonds versus Team Rice.
Which also makes no sense.
Awful.
Like, why you got Barry Bonds and Jerry Rice as head coaches and an NBA basketball all-star? Like, you can't get former NBA all-stars. You got to get Barry Bonds.
You know who was decent? Terrell Owens.
I could see that. He's an athlete.
Well, he's
an athlete. I could see that for sure.
He was chewing up the court because he was running up. There was another former NBA guy. You could tell he'd put on a few LBs, and he was struggling to get up the court. I was dying laughing. I'm like, this is terrible. And then there was a mascot on there playing a regular role, like not just being a goof out there. The mascot was trying to play. I was like, what is going on here?
It's a joke. I can't seem to come to grips with whether it's the NBA, NHL, the NFL. I mean, thank God for the Four Nations tournament, because this has been way better than what any All-Star festivities we've had in forever, I would say. So the NHL they're leading the charge right now, I guess you could say, in mid-season best on best. That's for sure. All right, one more lap around the track, fellas. Overdrive continues on TSN2 and TSN 1050. Today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Not much on the sports calendar tonight, fellas, so how about a little futures play? I'm looking at the Four Nations. I'm looking at the MVP category, and sitting there with the third shortest odds, Sidney Crosby at 5-1. I like that play. I like it. Today's best bets powered by FanDuel. Live same-game parlays are available every Four Nations face-off game on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Please play responsibly, 19 plus, and physically located in Ontario. Yeah, Sid the Kid, 5-1, third shortest odds.
Well, you got to figure if they win and he pots a couple or anything, does anything on Thursday night, it's almost, I don't know. I kind of think it's McJesus' moment, though. I think it's the table is being set for Connor McDavid to say, watch this, folks. I'm going to get the torch from Sid. I've watched, I've learned, and I'm going to take control of this. It just wouldn't shock me whatsoever.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
Or you could have a goaltender steal it. Could be the Connor Hellebuck show.
Yep.
Or the Jordan Binnington show. You know,
wouldn't that be a story? Everyone kind of clowned on the guy for the week, and he comes up big. Yeah, that'd be great. Would be a good story,
man. Yeah, it would.
Yeah.
Would be a fantastic story. Well, hey, the big guy's back next week. So you guys, you've had the supply teachers all week long. The real guy back in. You guys excited for it or what?
Is he back tomorrow?
I believe he's back tomorrow. He's back
we might
tomorrow.
as well not. That guy will be yelling and screaming for 3 hours straight. We might as well not even show.
He missed so much this week. So much going on. But he'll be back, and he'll be ready to tee up Canada, U.S., Four Nations face-off on Thursday. You know it. All right, boys. A lot of fun. Excited to be with you guys as always. That does it for us. Not much going on tonight, so I was going to say enjoy the games and that whole thing. There's not much, but we'll be back tomorrow at
4 p.m.
We'll chat then.